All right. We're here at Comic-Con 2014 with the legendary Walter Simonson.
Or something.
Or something. Well, we'll go with that for now.
Are you good with legendary?
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Okay, well, we'll back up.
It sounds like my career is over.
Oh, no. That was not the intent at all.
I know.
So we're here to talk about the re-release of your RoboCop Terminator project.
Okay.
And anything else we can think of real quick here. I was rereading it this morning. Loved the way y'all put that together with the AI from RoboCop being responsible for the Terminators.
That was all Frank. Frank was the writer, and it was his idea to do it that way, and I thought it was a great idea. And I loved the way he treated time travel, kind of a series of waves through the continuum, and it made it so you could do dramatic stuff with time running out, all the time. It was like deadline. It was like instant Deadline City, kind of a freelancer's nightmare, actually. I thought that was all right, so I was thrilled to do it.
Yeah, and so are you working on any other properties besides these guys now these days?
I am, but not a dark horse. But nevertheless, I'm here. What I'm doing is I'm doing a new creator-owned book called Ragnarok that's coming out from IDW. And it's basically, for the first time in 30 years, I've gone back to the Norse myths, which are something I knew about before, long before I knew about Marvel Comics, actually.
Right.
And I'm telling a story where Ragnarok in the Norse myths is where all the bad guys, all the good guys get together at the end of time, they fight each other and they all die.
Right.
And the world sinks into the sea and everything burns and it's the end of all things. So the story I'm telling is I start with that. Only it turns out that when Ragnarok happens, I show the classic version first, then we learn over the first couple of issues, I'm not giving too much away here, that Thor wasn't there when Ragnarok happened. Because he was not there, the Midgard serpent was not killed. Because the Midgard serpent was not killed, in the end, the bad guys won. And because the bad guys won, gods are all dead, the 9 worlds all collide, they make a giant land in the twilight, and hundreds of years later, Thor comes back. No one knows where he's been, what happened to him. He doesn't know what's happened, finds out very quickly, and the gist of the comic is going to be he picks up his hammer and he goes out into the Twilight Lands, into the Dusk Lands, and goes to find the enemies and discuss with them the events of the past several hundred years. That's my story. First issue came out yesterday. It's from IDW. So after you finish talking to me, you can go get one. Go get one over at the booth.
That's where we're going next.
That's my pitch.
I was a huge fan of the Thor run. Obviously, I remember distinctly opening up the first issue with Thor hitting the sword. So that was a big run. I enjoyed it immensely. So I feel like I'd be remiss since you're the guy who turned Thor into a frog, if I didn't ask you.
Well, he won't be a frog this time.
Turning him into a Disney princess.
No, I've heard that. That was pretty funny, actually. And I will say, I said something to somebody else, that I've seen more mentions on the web of the frog story than I've seen in years because of the girl story. And I will say, I'm not sure what that says about frogs, and I'm not sure what it says about girls. I found it really strange that that's kind of a comparison or thing that was being brought up. But I understand it, but it still seemed, I don't want to go there. It seemed too weird. But the thing about stories, one of the things that, I don't know the current writer. I mean, I haven't met him. I gather from stuff I've read, I have not followed the book, I've gathered from stuff I've read that he's a really good writer. He's done some really great stuff on Thor. And my feeling is, you can use almost any idea, and if you really execute well, you can turn out some great stuff. So, I'm an empirical guy. I'm not so worried about, I'm doing this with Thor. Show me the comic. Let me read the comic, let me see what happens with it.
Right.
And this is a guy that's done some really good work and had a lot of, I'm sure people who are going nuts right now have said in the past, wow, this guy's a great writer. He's better than Walt Simonson. So I'm thinking, well, then let's wait for him to do his thing and see how it works out. So I'm totally game to wait. And his disadvantage in a way is that when I did the stuff with like Beta Ray Bill and Thor, the Frog, everything, I only had 20 years of comics behind me. He's got like 50.
Right.
That's a lot of story. Now, Thor was unpublished for a little while, but it's mostly been published the whole time. That's a lot of old stories, a lot of continuity, and you can't match all of it. But what you try to do is you try to tell stories that haven't been told before. That was the genesis of Beta Ray Bill when I did it originally, to try and find a way to tell a story that that felt like you had not read it before. And so that's what my feeling is with this. I mean, I know there's like, well, there was a girl in a what-if story, girl Thor and a girl, but there's not much. And so really, it hasn't happened before, really. And that means you'll be going places you haven't gone before. Well, some people are comfortable with that, some aren't. But sometimes you really grouse about it, but you have to buy the issue to see what happens.
Right.
And really, if that happens, my work is done, or his work will be done.
That's what our people do. We complain, but we still read the books.
But that's what. So I'm interested to see it. I haven't read it. I don't read books I used to write and draw. I don't keep track of after I've done them, because if I've invested a lot of myself in it, I hear my character's voice when I'm trying to read somebody else's work. And so mostly it's not incumbent upon me to keep track of stuff later. Well, okay, it's fine. I don't have to. So I haven't read the current stuff. I may have to pick at least the first issue of the Princess Thor up, just to see what he's doing, because I'm curious. But I think, again, I would like to read it before I have any opinion about what he's doing. But I think as an idea, it's perfectly fine.
Okay, it's got the 2-minute signal, so I got one more question.
Okay.
Our website is gonzogeek.com, so we always like to finish up asking folks what they geek out about. What's the thing you're the biggest geek about?
Oh man, I'm very slow at answering questions like this. I think I'll tell you one thing. I'll never be able to meet this guy because he's no longer living. But I'm a giant fan of the work of an artist named Jim Holdaway. Holdaway was an English artist. He did newspaper strips. He did a strip called Modesty Blaze that started back about 1970. Holdaway did it for about 8 or 9 years and died at the age of 45. And it's an adventure strip written by Peter O'Donnell, created by Peter O'Donnell, ran in British newspapers for a number, ran after he died. Other artists picked it up, and it ran up until a few years ago. O'Donnell himself died a couple of years back now. But Holdaway's work in that story was just brilliant. It was this really incisive pen work, a lot of blacks, very graphic, really beautiful, heavily influenced my early work on Manhunter. And it's still work. You look at a lot of artists, like I love Jack Kirby stuff. I'm second to none, except maybe Mark Evanier, in my love of Jack Kirby. But I don't have to look at a lot of Jack Kirby now because I've seen a lot of it and I've really internalized a lot of it. Jim Holdaway's work, there's not that much of it. He worked for 8 or 9 years in newspaper strips, did about 15 or 16 episodes before he died. But I can go back and look at any of that stuff, and occasionally when I run into a dead end, as an artist, you get tired of drawing the same things, you need to rethink what you're doing. I can go back and look at Holdaway's work, which goes back to the 70s, and I am refreshed seeing it. I'm refreshed again seeing what he did, how he approached his storytelling, how he drew the human figure, how he used his pen work, how his graphic design influences the way this. And this is a newspaper strip. He only has 3 panels a day to work with. It's not like he's got a whole page to do all kinds of stuff with. So I'm wowed by that work. I would give more than a nickel to have been able to meet Jim Holdaway back when he was working. But I love the stuff, and I geek out about that. I still geek out about it when I see it. And I go back, and as I said, I have him in my studio, and of all the artists I've looked at, and I've looked at a lot of artists, he's one of maybe 2 or 3 guys, and I would have to think who the other guys were, where I can really go back. Mobius would be one, where I could really go back, and I just look at the work again. I don't always look at it for a solution. I just look at it, it's like taking a clean, fresh bath. You feel so refreshed when you get out. Then that kind of lets me start over again and maybe approach a problem a little differently. So that's the guy. Jim Holdaway is the guy I would geek out over.